I'm Suzi Landolfi, and welcome to Be Crazy Well. Now, why would a therapist say that? Because we all have mental health struggles, even therapists. The good news is we have so much more information about how we can be crazy well. On my podcast, we don't focus on what's wrong with us. We want to know what happened to us. We're going to explore how trauma affected us, both negatively and positively. That's right. I said positively. It's called post-traumatic growth, and it's a real thing. Be Crazy Well will share mental health wellness practices, the newest mental health research, and most importantly, how we all get to create the person we deserve to be and the life we deserve to live. So join the mental health evolution and be crazy well.
To see within is to know yourself.
Bree Fram, I found you. This is like a dating game. Like, I found you on the internet. So I am looking around because I want to make sure that Be Crazy Well is really inclusive. And so I was looking for organizations that I could talk to about the LGBTQ experience in the military. And to be honest, I contacted a couple, I never heard back. And I was disheartened. Unlike you, where I just send out one LinkedIn message and you contact me back immediately. So everybody, I want you to meet Bree Fram as a guest this week on Be Crazy Well. I hope it's one of many times that she will be a guest here. And Bree, I told you when we first talked the first time that I wanted you to decide what you wanted to talk about. I wanted you to direct this. I certainly have lots of thoughts and feelings about what my own family has experienced. As I told you, my brother's gay. I want to know more, though, about what needs and deserves to be done. And I changed that word from need to deserves to be done. I never say, oh, people need therapy. You need therapy. No, you deserve it. And you deserve change. You deserve the change. And so does the military, and so does this country in terms of trans people. And at this time, I mean, I feel I'm 72 years old. I feel like we're back in 1952 when I was 2. I feel like there's so much going on right now that is so hurtful, so unfair, such a betrayal. And such a loss for all of us. It's like, I have no desire to go back to where I was when I was, all fucked up and still struggling from my trauma. And I don't want us to go back as a community or as people as well. So share with us first something about yourself, and then guide where we deserve to go in this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. The challenge with that wide of a mandate is always where to start, because when we talk about the LGBTQ military community, there are a plethora of avenues we could go down. But why I was so excited to respond and say, yes, of course, I'd be happy to speak with you, is because sharing our stories is the most powerful weapon we have for making any sort of social change. So the ability to just talk about my story and the story of others is always something that I jump at, because it's an honor and a privilege to be able to share those stories. But just a little bit about myself. I am an active duty lieutenant colonel in the United States Space Force, and I am the highest ranking out transgender officer in the U.S. military on active duty in the Department of Defense.
So if we had an audience right now, this is what you would be hearing. Woo! Woo! So I just wanted to throw that in.
So it is a pleasure and an honor for me to represent the stories, particularly of transgender military service members. I'm also the president of SPARTA, which is an organization that supports, educates, and advocates on behalf of those service members. And we have about 1,700 members across every branch of service, in all specialties, serving at home, deployed around the world, doing everything the military asks of them. So my ability to share those stories and to prove just how valuable trans people are to the military is something that I always want to do.
And here we are talking on Veterans Day. And one of the problems, as you know, I work with emerging vets and players, so I work with a lot of combat veterans. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, we need to be honoring all people who serve in the military. Anybody who signs up and says, I'm going to serve, that's an honor that we need to bestow on you. We need to honor you in that. So bless you for taking Veterans Day as well to talk to me. And hopefully we can get this going. So SPARTA, people can find that on the internet. Is that right?
Absolutely. SpartaPride.org is our website, and we're also on social media. And our job there really is just to highlight those stories, make sure there is an awareness of the fact that trans people can serve. But most importantly, it's to serve as a place where those service members can realize they're not alone. Because though there are 1,700 of our members, and there are an estimated 10 to 15,000 trans people serving in all components of the military, with the size of the military, they're often the only one in their unit, the only one on their base. And finding that ability to connect when you're the first or the only in any given situation is incredibly valuable. So more than anything, that's what we provide to people, is that feeling that they're not alone. They have a community to reach out to that is there to provide support.
And how does the military view SPARTA and you and what's going on? What's been your experience with?
So it's been a bit of a mixed bag. By and large, the response from the military to having these external organizations has been positive, because it does allow people to be their best self. And to navigate these policies when both the person and maybe even the unit or their commander doesn't know what to do. It's another source of information that they can reach out to and say, yes, we know your policy. We can provide analysis or expertise and give that advice people need on both sides. But in other ways, any outside advocacy organization can have a challenging relationship with the military, because generally you're asking, hey, please change. And that's not something that's easy for any of us.
So you're a professional disruptor. I get that. So am I.
I'm a professional at walking that narrow line
Right.
between the restrictions that the uniform places on me and the role of being an advocate, because that is a difficult thing to do when you're in the military, because you have to frame things the right way. There are restrictions on your speech in a way that other advocates might not have. And it's something you need to build a skill set in order to navigate properly and keep yourself and others out of trouble, yet still make positive change.
Can you tell us a little bit about your story, your journey? You've been in the military for how long?
Coming up in January, I will hit 20 years in the military. It's been a long road, and we could talk, my military story for forever. But I'll go back to just, why did I join? Well, I graduated college in 2001, and I was looking for jobs, doing some interviews in the civilian sector. The military had not been on my mind at all. I wanted to be an astronaut, and eventually wanted to work up to that. But then we were attacked. And I felt that I wanted to give back. I wanted to be part of something greater than myself, that allowed me to serve and defend the freedoms and the opportunities that I had been given, and make sure we continue to pass those on to our children and grandchildren. So my world shifted on a dime after September 11th. And it took a while. It took a fight, really, for me to get in. They lost my paperwork and so many other things. You need this evaluation and that. But January of 2003, I joined the Air Force. And have served in a number of different roles, mostly program management on satellite programs, but I've also worked in strategic planning, international affairs. I was a congressional fellow, spent a year on the Hill, and now I've had the honor of transferring to the Space Force, getting recommissioned into a brand new military service, and have that opportunity to build what is truly a 21st century military culture that brings us all in and values the military's most valuable thing, its people.
it's not lost on me when you say, I want to go fight for the freedoms and pass them on to kids. And yet you didn't always have the same freedoms. You didn't even have the same freedoms in the military. So I just want to point that out, how really nice you are, because I'm not that nice. Like I'm going to go right for the juggler and go, oh, so you'll let them fight for freedoms that you're taking away from them, that you're just denying them. So I'm just that kind of person. I'm from Boston. What do you expect? So I just want to say that.
I think you have generations of minorities that have been in the same position where they are willing to put something above themselves. And that is so important for the military ethos, that it's not about me, it's about we. And we have people that, even though they were denied their fundamental rights in society, chose to serve because it was the opportunity to try and make things better, to live up to those highest ideals that we have. The notion that we are a nation of aspirants, now is not good enough, but we were put here to make it better for the future.
I'm going to ask when they don't edit this, they never take out anything I say, which I'm really grateful for. Anybody else is. But I'm going to make them play that statement twice. I'm just going to loop it, because I want people to hear that. So in case you missed it, you're going to hear this throughout. Thank you. And that will be something that just needs to be said, because we don't realize, we don't want to. When we're in our isms, like when we're in our isms, when we're in our ism and our fear to put others down to make ourselves appear more valuable and better, we never look at what is given by those people. I mean, we couldn't, right? So when I say we, in the general we, of this idea that I've got to not see your greatness in order to discriminate and even do worse. So
and that's one of the reasons why I believe minority leaders, and I've specifically studied this within LGBTQ leaders, are so good at creating a culture that is team and outward focused, that it's about all of us. Because instead of taking that attitude of, I went through some shit, so I'm going to make you go through some shit, it's, I went through some shit, and I hope none of you ever have to go through that, because we're going to work on this together. And that, to me, is what really makes LGBTQ leaders in the military in particular so often amazing.
Right. And that's true leadership too. I mean, we talk about being a leader, which that can be bestowed on you. Like sometimes you don't even have to do anything great to be a leader. I hate to say that. And it's true, not just in the military. Anywhere, you can be born into it. You can be given something because somebody wants you to have it in order to give them power. True leadership is that I dare I eat last, is about we. I mean, I having worked with the military community now for over 15 years, it's very clear to me about the idea of we and team. We also have retired professional athletes. And so your SPARTA organization makes perfect sense to me for all trans people everywhere, because it is everywhere. It's in every aspect of life. So when you're trying to do something that's very difficult to do, that most people don't do, and then on top of that, you're going to be discriminated against, even to the point of worrying about your own physical safety. That's a huge, huge struggle. So how do you keep yourself in the struggle? What, I'm a therapist. I want to know what happened to you. I'm going to go back into the childhood and go, wait a minute. How did you develop this? Because not everybody has what you have. Not everybody has that dedication to the we, that I'm going to leave this place better than I found it. I have OCD, so I always leave your house better than I found it, right? Unless you have OCD, and then we'll work together. But the point being is that we don't think that way. We don't think about generations. You mentioned children. Do you have any children?
I do. I have two children, a son who's 14 and a daughter who's 10.
Oh, you're in it. You're in that. Think of it. 14-year-old, right? And a 10-year-old who probably thinks she's what, 15 or 20?
340
Yeah,
probably.
that's what I was gonna say. Second born girl. Yeah, you got it. You got it. So what happened to you? How was that developed in you?
So that's a great question, because I think of myself almost as an accidental advocate. The
That may be
legacy
the
of
title of your book. Hang on, that may be the title of the book. Let me put a light on for a second so I can see better. Okay, there we go.
honestly, if I ever write my memoirs, I think the title has to be Normal Enough, because when I was growing up, you know, I knew I was trans from a pretty early age, and I got caught in my mom's things around 9 or 10 years old, and they took me to a therapist. And after one session, you know, the therapist basically handed me back to my parents and said, he's normal enough. And so I'm like, perfect.
I love that therapist. Bless his heart. He's normal enough.
And it was then basically forgot about by my family for decades. So
But not by you. You didn't forget.
no, oh, certainly not by me. Um, but I had a legacy of military service in my family. Both my grandfathers served in World War II, had some amazing stories and accomplishments. But I had no thoughts of being in the military. And so how did this come about? Certainly not from a perspective of advocacy. It goes back to that, I just wanted to give back a little bit and see where that took me. Because it also enabled me to go after my dreams of working in space, trying to be an astronaut. So it was a perfect mixture of both the personal goals and then the what do I want to see for the world type goals. But it wasn't until much later in my career, not only when I understood my identity better and had the opportunity to fight for that and to become part of this effort to have open transgender service, and then to be thrust onto the stage as one of the senior most people, you know, it was almost an obligation. Because again, getting back to how we think of ourselves in the military,
Yeah.
if senior ranking, I will take command. You know, that's part of the code. I will lead. And so my responsibility as a senior officer who had unique access to other people in the Pentagon, other senior leaders, knowledge and contacts on Capitol Hill, if not me, then who? And it was finding those handfuls of people that had that type of skill set and ability and willingness to share their stories that really made a difference in bringing this all together, particularly once we had the clock turned back and discrimination reinstitutionalized.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's what's happened. And have you noticed a difference in the last couple of years?
Well, we've certainly been on a roller coaster for the past 6.5 years, because we had this euphoric high in 2016 when open trans service was announced. And you had people coming out of the woodwork, yes, I'm trans, and you know, the military being like, great, you know, no different than the day after Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. The mission marches on, people can be themselves, and we actually perform a little bit better. But less than a year later, to have all of us in a moment where the commander-in-chief attempted to fire us via tweet and then put formal policy in place saying no more trans people can come out, no more trans people can get into the service. And to be that endangered species for the handful of us that had come out and were basically allowed to continue serving with the expectation that the policy and the environment would be so onerous that we'd eventually just attrit away. And even more heinous being the fact that within the policy that allowed us to continue serving was a clause that said, should any of the courts that are reviewing this policy, and you know, there are multiple lawsuits going on, find our example of distinguished and honorable service as a reason to find the policy unconstitutional or discriminatory, the clause allowing us to serve would be severed and we were all gone immediately thereafter.
Talk about
So
pressure.
talk about living with the executioner's axe right behind your neck of, yes, of course we want this policy in our example to show the way that this is discriminatory, but then what happens to me? What happens to my family? So it's about 1,600 of us lived that way for almost 2 years until the Biden administration, in one of its first acts, issued a new executive order allowing people to serve again. So if there's anything I want people to take away about trans service members, especially those that served through that time, is their resiliency, their ability to lace up their boots and get the job done despite all of that hanging over them, and to survive and serve to this day.
And the idea of being dedicated to their oath, like they're willing to lay down their life to protect us, to support this country's democracy, which again is hanging in the balance always. And then to be told that, to know that your entire life and your family's well-being is at such risk is beyond the, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, the amount of anxiety, pressure, depression, the difficulties already, and then add that on. I'm just sitting here in awe. And I think you said it best, Bree, when you said all oppressed people get this. They know this. You know, when my mom and dad got together, and my stepdad's Native American, Black, and Italian, when they got together and found each other when I was 10, that's 1960, there was still a law in the books in Massachusetts that Black and white couldn't marry. It was still on the, I mean, no one was actually actively enforcing it, but it was still on the books. So again, always that idea of what's going to happen next. I can't just go to the grocery store. You know, I couldn't just go with my dad somewhere without the fear of something's going to happen. You guys live that all the time. You men and women live that all the time, like all the time, because even the law and even what Biden just did doesn't necessarily change everybody and how they view you and what they could do. That's got to be talked about.
It's very difficult because there's still that fear that with a stroke of a pen, the next president could say, no, you're out again.
Right.
Because interestingly, going all the way back to the integration of African Americans into the military in the 40s, and then adding women, adding lesbians or gays, bisexuals, it's not based in law. It's all based in executive orders. So a president has immense power to change those policies. While we can talk about Congress repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell as a law that prevented LGBT people from serving, there was no corresponding law that said, yes, you can. So that's up to the administration. So we have to continue fighting and sharing our stories and making it known just how valuable the service of all minority groups are, all intersectional identities, because our military is going to fight and win wars in the future with brain power. And it does not matter what bodies those brains are in, as long as they can accomplish the mission and meet the standards.
You know, and the idea too is that I can make, as a president, an executive order, but that doesn't change the hearts and mind of some of the people I have to work with. So you still are at risk with some of your leaders, some of your coworkers that you're with. So it doesn't just necessarily go, oh, we're all fine now because we have an executive order. You still have to deal with that at times, yes?
Yeah, we certainly do. And that's again where I go back to the power of story and sharing examples and breaking stereotypes, which is what we do often just by existing, is breaking a stereotype. And in a weird way, perhaps, I look back at President Trump's tweets and actions and I say thank you, because what he did was shine a spotlight on our service that had never been there before. That at that time, about 50% of the American public and 50% of the military thought that trans people should be able to serve openly. But after those tweets and trans people in the military being everywhere in the media, you had 70% of people in the military and in the American public agreeing 2 months later. 2 years later, high 80% range. So it's amazing the power of story and that spotlight that was shown on it.
Yeah.
But still, those stereotypes persist. In fact, I had a boss that retired about 6 or 9 months after I started working with him, and he said that I broke his stereotype of a trans person just by coming to work and showing up every day to do my job. And all I could think was, whoa, what a low bar.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm thinking what was going on in his head was so much
Right.
more than what the reality is.
Yeah, so those stereotypes out there of trans folks, like that people like me are weeping messes that could never return fire because we're too busy thinking about what we're going to wear that night, or that trans men are steroidal rage monsters that are just going to charge and get everyone killed. It couldn't be further from the truth, but that's out there. And so us just being there and doing our jobs actually makes a difference.
And it's so interesting to me too. So as my dad, having been Native American, he was part of the Penobscot tribe, and having lots of wonderful, I call them wisdom experiences with Native people. So many of the indigenous tribes see trans people as two spirits, as above and beyond, because they're not just one gender, they're both genders. Like they get a better view of the world. And to be just very special healing people. And so that's the other part. The other problem is that we, meaning our society, was looking at what was wrong as opposed to looking what is great about the idea of transforming your gender. Trans, it means to move. That's all it means. It means to move, right? And it's a spectrum. We're all on a spectrum. You should like see the looks on people's faces, especially guys, real macho guys, that I say, oh, by the way, we all start out as female. And they're like, what? No, that's not true. Like, oh, yeah, it's true. Like we all transform from female genitalia to male genitalia, and it can stop anywhere in between. It can just be a whole wonderful smorgasbord of genitals. So please understand that even gender can be on a spectrum.
Well, understanding, breaking away from the binary, thinking in shades of gray, that's a valuable trait anywhere, but particularly in the military, where we can't always have a or B answer, where we have to understand complex problems and realize that it's not necessarily well defined. We have to be able to operate in that chaotic world where there's 1,000, 1,000,000, 1,billion options out there. And if you can't understand that nuance, you may make bad decisions.
Yeah. It's funny you said about the gray, because as you can see, I was very happy when I let my gray hair grow in. And I'm going to tell you metaphorically, when we talk about black and white thinking, that idea, I really believe that as I started to let my gray grow in, it was 22 years ago that I did this, I really did change. There was a change about me that transformed. I started to transform my thinking, my way of being, as I allowed myself, my true self, even if it's just my gray hair, to be more visible, to be more a part of me. And it made me better. And I don't understand why we can't think that way about trans people too. That as you started to transform and you didn't have to hide, you were normal enough, as we like to say it. You better write that book. That's the best thing. And I'm going to use that as a quote, and I'm going to give you all the credit there. It's like Bree Fram.
I'll get there, I hope, someday. But right now, my second book's on how LGBTQ folks develop as leaders, and so that's consuming all my time. And I think it's a fascinating area to study and look at for all of those unique experiences that we go through as these crucible moments, transition, coming out, discrimination, that just allow us to grow and develop skills that aren't unique to LGBTQ people, but maybe far more prevalent, or we come at them in different ways than others.
Sure. So tell us your first book, tell us your second book, and then I have an important question about being an astronaut.
Yeah, so my first book is called With Honor and Integrity, Transgender Troops in Their Own Words, that released last year. And in fact, just today is the release date of the paperback version from NYU Press. You can get it anywhere books are sold. It contains a little bit of the history of trans people in the military, but its core is 26 different stories written in individuals' own words of what their experience has been like. Some are funny, some are poignant, some are sad, and some just are interesting in ways you never would have believed, that just let you see trans members of the military as people. Again, all those shades of gray,
Right.
and people who've served back to the Vietnam era, and most of them are still serving today. So great work. The next one is, as I said, we're still working on the title with the publisher, but it is about LGBTQ leadership. It'll be out in late 23 or maybe early 24. And really excited. But you can check us out and the work we're doing on both that and a podcast at forgedinfire.org.
Ah, I love that. Forged in Fire. So we'll put that all in the write-up when we post this. So we'll put how to get in touch with you and all of that. We'll do that. So, you know, I'm thinking you still deserve to be an astronaut. How's that going? And I hope you haven't given up that goal yet.
So I have given up that goal, unfortunately. I tried to get in to be a flight test engineer early in my military career, and I didn't get my medical clearance to fly because a couple weeks before, totally random, I sat up and had some floaters in my eye, and it turns out I had a little cut in the back of my eye, and it was sealed with a laser. Everything was fine, but they said, nope, we don't know what could happen if you were in space and this happened again, or even in the air. The odd thing was, and the disappointing thing was, that they said, if you were already flight qualified, no big deal, but we have enough candidates that are perfect that we can't afford to take someone with this kind of risk, even though we know what it is.
You were not normal enough.
Exactly. But later on, I found I do get fairly motion sick, and some astronauts do, but I might have had a hard time of it anyways. But I still do plan in maybe 15 years, when prices come down a little bit, I will buy that ticket. I would love to get up to space, you know, take a couple laps around the Earth and just see everything that we can see.
You deserve that. You hear that, Jeff Bezos? Do you hear that? She deserves him to go there. I'll make sure I tag him in the link so when we post it so he can see that.
I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. So I would love to have you on again. One of the things I would love to do is I'd love you to contact me after we do, you know, once we end this, and tell me how we can do a series. Like, who else do you want to bring on, if you want to bring anybody else on in the discussion? What it is you'd love to delve deeper into. And let's do a series on this. And let's keep this going. Let's keep this conversation going, because so I happen to believe the exact same with you, is your story is the most important. And when we encourage people to create their own story, that's your right. Once you're born, you get to create your own story. I don't get to create it for you. As a parent, I don't get to create it for you. As a boss, I don't get to create it for you as a lover. And so I'm really believe that's the most important thing we get to do. And once we lay down and we're done creating a story, we can go, I'm so glad I created that story that's me. And the other thing is that I'm so tired of the idea, as a therapist myself, of telling you what's wrong with you and giving you a label, as opposed to wanting to find out what happened to you. And the whole story of what happens to us is some of the shit that happened to us caused some tremendous effects of fear and sadness that we call anxiety and depression and other things. Those same things that happened to us also created superpowers. That's the full story. And I don't care if it's whether you're in combat or you're in a bakery and you're a baker. I don't care what it is. The point is, you have both. And we need to talk about everything that makes a person whole, that holistic view of a person. Some of my greatest superpowers I got from my abusive dad. That's just a fact. Like, he gave me some great superpowers. And you talked about it too, about the resiliency. Is like what happens to us can also create tremendous strength, courage, and insight. And the other thing I wanted to share with you is that having a gay brother and being involved in the gay community and the LGBTIQ community for a long time, for me, I can't even imagine what my life would have been like without the wonderful influence and inspiration of these men and women that helped me create a better story. Because that's what they did. They helped create me in a way that I'm just so grateful for.
And I think we all have a little bit of that. There are so many people that, whether they ever knew it or not, inspired me to be who I was.
Yeah.
To take some courage, again, knowing that I'm not alone in this.
Right. On this Veterans Day, we get to celebrate everybody who has served. You don't have to go downrange, be in a firefight to be a valuable and important member of the force that keeps this country and all of us safe. So bless you, Bree Fram, for all that you do and are doing and have done. And I'd like to talk to you again. I feel blessed and enlightened more. You've helped me grow my light even more. And as I get older and it gets a little dimmer, I'm really always looking for those that keep the spark in all of us, not just alive, but bright enough so that other people can find us and find support. When we have a flashlight, we could shine it on, look for where we're going, or we could just shine it on ourselves so people could find a safe haven. And that's what you are. You have created a safe place and a courageous place and an important place for people to understand how valuable they are and always have been, and valuable just because they breathe. You don't even have to do anything. Just have to breathe and be part of this wonderful community. So bless you for that.
Thank you.
All right, great. Bree Fram, and Bree, we've got this song we're dedicating to you now. I have a friend who wrote this theme song. He happens to be the son of a very famous rapper. And I got to hang out with him as he was doing some more internal and self-awareness work. And I called him up and I said, Calvin, I need a theme song for my podcast. He goes, what's your podcast called, Suzi? And I called Be Crazy Well. And he goes, of course it is. That's what it would call. He goes, I think I got the best song. And he sent me this song, and it's called Be Your Best Self.
It's perfect.
So it's perfect. And his name's Calvin Love. I can't thank him enough for doing that. But you're the person that has come on this podcast that I can say, this is her theme song for sure. So Bree Fram, thank you for being normal enough, because we need you.
Well, thank you. And I look forward to talking to you again sometime.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Love yourself.